kind of deal here. What we're reviewing today is the newest Timex Marlin reissue that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. This has been floating around social media, a bunch of different forums, different websites, Houdinki, Worn and Wound. Everyone's sort of been covering this watch. It came out of nowhere, hit like wildfire, and now I was just on eBay. It's early November 2017 right now. One of them went for $500 something on eBay, and there I'm looking right now at a freaking eBay listing of the reissue. It's at $380 with 2 days left still. So absolutely crazy hype, completely unwarranted. But that's not really the point of this video. We'll get to the review really quickly. I'm not going to spend too much time on the actual specs of the watch itself, because to be honest, there's really not much to say about it. I guess I'll do a wristwatch check for you guys, or put it on the wrist, and sort of talk about the sizing and proportion. But I kind of want to talk more about what this watch means for Timex, and what it means for the kind of low, I would want to say low entry level watch world in general. So I'm going to quickly just talk about the specs really quickly. As you can see, this is not the stock strap. I went ahead and put it on a Rios vintage style strap. I think it looks way cooler. Not really a huge fan of this fake lizard grain leather. You know, I'm sure there are some people that absolutely love it and think it adds to the vintage charm of it. I think it's a little bit old manish, to be honest, and I kind of like these vintage style straps with the double stitching, and this one has sort of like a suede rough finish, which makes it even better in my opinion. Anyway, so this is obviously the reissue of the original Timex Marlin. What I really love about this is that they kept everything true to the original. It is a very dainty by modern standards 34 millimeters with an 18 millimeter lug width. I love that they kept the acrylic crystal. As you guys can see here, this camera is picking up the pretty incredible sunburst finish that they put on this watch. I'm gonna go ahead and do a wrist shot for you guys really quickly. Quick wristwatch check. As always, wearing my no date sub that I've grown very fond of. So I'm gonna throw this on for you guys really quickly. So it's 34 millimeters, like I said, so not everyone can pull this off. It's a pretty polarizing size still. I applaud Todd Snyder for going sort of the vintage route with sizing, which we'll get to in a little bit. But here you can go ahead, you can see it on my 7¼ inch wrist. Sorry guys. As you can see, the acrylic crystal actually attracts a good amount of glare. I'm actually even having trouble getting the lighting right on this. You know, it retailed I think at $199. I got this from the Todd Snyder website directly. Immediately when I found out about it, thank God, because now it's trending for ridiculous amounts of money because they're constantly sold out. But as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, it looks pretty good, and I don't see why anyone with a wrist around my size or smaller wouldn't be able to rock this. Especially if you're wearing some long sleeves, I think it goes really well, especially if you pair it with the right strap. So back to the actual technical specs and whatnot. So as of early November, I'm still not exactly sure what movement is in here. And I think that's something that a lot of people have been trying to do. I know even Worn and Wound couldn't get that information outright. This has a Chinese movement in it, and I can only guess that it's probably a seagull movement. You know, which, I mean, what can you really expect for a $200 mechanical Timex? So it is manually wound. Let's see if I can wind it up for you guys. You'll be able to hear a little bit. So it has a pretty nice action. I think even though the seagull movements and the Chinese movements are pretty infamous for being, pretty cheap and cheaply constructed, I think they get a little bit too much grief. I think the seagull movements are pretty good. I used to have the seagull chronograph, which we reviewed, the 2-register 38 millimeter chronograph with the display case back, and I thought that watch was pretty freaking awesome for the price point that you. So overall, it actually is a pretty good looking watch. I think the way they do the sunburst, this sort of silver silver, almost chromy sunburst style finish on the watch is really cool. Love the numerals. It sort of reminds me of, a lot of the watches of the 50s and 60s. Almost kind of has this Calatrava vibe going. Super thin lugs. And the only thing I think that's really different with this watch is the old Marlins used to say waterproof right under. And now it just says Timex with nothing underneath the pinion position. And I think the only reason they did that was since this is sort of a mainstream watch, they didn't want to confuse people and have them jumping in the water with this thing. So that makes perfect sense to me. Okay, so let's get to the good stuff. So what does this watch mean for Timex? So for me, this is almost kind of like the dawn of a new era for Timex. Timex, according to the Worn and Wound article, Timex stopped making mechanical watches in 1982. And I'm sure as many of you see Timex now, they're sort of this, sub $100 quartz watchmaker that, they're pretty cheap watches. The construction isn't that great. They sell in places like, J. Crew and Macy's. I don't even know if Macy's carries them, but, some of these department stores have them. And it's more, I guess they sort of helped bring out the popularity in NATO straps back. You can see a lot of, I guess you can say maybe frat bros rocking their quartz Timexes with a lot of different colored NATO straps, which is pretty cool. I think it's a great watch that gets people into watches. I think probably their most popular watch right now is the Waterbury collection, which kind of looks like an Explorer a little bit. But anyways, like I said, so I think this is sort of a huge turning point for Timex. It's the dawn of their new era. Before, if you were talking about entry-level sort of mechanical watches, all I would really say to a new person is maybe get a Seiko dive watch or like a Seiko Alpinist, Seiko Cocktail Time or something like that. Or I would recommend a Hamilton Khaki King. I think those are pretty much no-brainers for anyone that's sort of into watches. I think most people would recommend that, maybe like an Orient watch or something like that. But no one really ever says Timex because they're just quartz movements. They don't really connect you to watchmaking, to the whole entire history of watchmaking. But now, in November 2017, that has all changed. And as you can see, these clearly are really popular right now. I mean, there's so much hype around these. Like I said, there's one that's going for $300 something on eBay right now, which is absolutely insane. And I really applaud Timex for doing this. I think that after the popularity of this watch, I think it's pretty plausible to say that plausible to think that Timex is gonna be releasing a lot more mechanical watches at this point. It's such a hit, I don't know why they wouldn't do it. And to be able to sort of speak to the sort of the new watch obsessives at a very budget-friendly price, I really wouldn't be surprised if we see a couple different new reissues. I wouldn't be surprised too if Todd Snyder is the company that brings a couple more reissues before Timex sort of brings mechanical watches back to the mainstream. So huge props to Timex, huge props to Todd Snyder. I think one of the big driving forces as to why this thing is so popular is because Todd Snyder, it's basically a Todd Snyder limited edition. They're the ones sort of that brainstormed, I guess you could say, this idea of bringing back an original mechanical Timex. And what I really like about it is this isn't just some internet community that decided they wanted a mechanical Timex. I mean, this is like sort of like a very GQ worthy, what should I say, like iconic style clothing company. They have a store in Madison Square. Here I have something I got via the mail, actually. You can see they even have someone like Matt Bomer. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's a pretty famous actor. Matt Bomer on the cover of their catalog. A lot of different clothing, jeans, watches. Hodinkee actually partners with them for different events, and they have some of their vintage watches on sale at the Hodinkee flagship store in Madison Square. So I think it's really cool I'm not sure who was sort of who kind of brought this idea to fruition, but they probably saw the Houdinki watches that go for thousands of dollars at their store, and they're like, man, we have so many people that come in that think mechanical watches are really cool, but they're really inaccessible. So what did they do? They decided to make a Timex. That fits the bill at around $200, which is the perfect sort of entry level price point, I think, for anyone that's trying to get into watches. So here, guys, I'm just going to do a quick little comparison so you guys can see the size. Here's a 35 millimeter Nomos Orion. Here is a 36 millimeter Rolex Explorer. So that kind of gives you an idea of how this Timex wears. You can see it's actually pretty small. Keep in mind that it has a little bit more of a bezel than the Nomos, which is why it wears so much smaller. One thing I do want to point out that I didn't point out earlier that's really, really cool about this is that it has the coolest acrylic crystal I've ever seen. I mean, on a modern watch. I mean, they really went all out with trying to keep this as vintage as possible. You can see that acrylic crystal probably accounts for almost a third of the watch thickness, and creates this really cool distortion from different angles, which makes the dial look extremely domed as well. You guys can kind of pick up on that there. But yeah, it kind of adds to that really cool vintage charm. And I also applaud Todd Snyder and Timex for sticking to the original proportions. I'm sure many of you heard that smaller watches are kind of coming back in style. I don't know about 34 millimeters, maybe going back to like the 38, 40 millimeter range. But at 34, I think it is a pretty cool, bold move. And gauging by the popularity of this, I wouldn't be surprised if they do a couple more reissues that might be kind of blown up in size a little bit for the general public. But yeah, guys, anyway, let me know what you think about this Timex. I think it is a home run. I know a lot of people might be talking smack about this because that has a Chinese movement. And I don't know what other reason they would, but I don't really see this. I'm not really judging this watch for what it is. I'm sort of judging this watch more so for what it represents, and what it could mean for brands like Timex, and what they might be able to bring to the table for newbies to watch collecting and even seasoned veterans. I mean, I purchased this watch myself, and I have a Nomos and a Rolex sitting right next to it. So wanted to get a taste of sort of the watch that may be getting the ball rolling for Timex to get back into the mechanical game. So as always, guys, follow us at Properly Wound on Instagram. Follow us on the Properly Wound Facebook group. We engage a lot there. I think we have something like 6,500 members. So everyone's posting opinions and cool wrist shots and whatnot. So, and you'll be able to find all the Properly Wound guys there. So until next time, guys, I will see you in the next review.